Okay, let's start. Today we'll mostly be dealing with combining several or sometimes many objects into one so you can deal with them all at once instead of having to go pick each time you want to move them or copy them. There are a couple of ways that AutoCAD provides for that. But first I'd like to look at a couple of things about assignment number 3. Just a couple of fine-tuning notes. We'll deal with later today putting these on a sheet in an organized fashion, but it gets very confusing with an elevation like this to know just where everything is. And in the real world, and we'll take a look at that drawing set in there, your dimensions are always going to be like a nice, neat line, string that's consistent from one elevation to the next. So people looking at the drawings know where to look for information and not to have to sort of look all over the place for it. And the easiest way to deal with that with dimensions is each dimension has basically 5 points you can move around. The 2 that define the definition points you actually pick to create the dimension. 1 for the piece of text itself, if you need to move that around. And then the ones I like to call your attention to right now are these 2, which locate where the dimension line is. If we have O-snaps turned on, we can select here and just drag it down to the snap point of that one. And now we have, well, I dragged that piece of text up there out of place. So I'll move that where it should be. Now we have 2 pieces of dimension text that look tidy and organized and useful. And we can do the same thing here. Drag this down to here. It'll also try to snap to the end of those. It's really a pain. I'm sorry. You have to be a little careful to make sure you get to get that point. We really like to have between the dimensioned object, just to keep clear what's a dimension and what's the thing it's dimensioning. If we have the thing being dimensioned, we really like to have the dimension lines held off a bit from that. You can set how big this gap is, but our definition points are still here and here, invisible, but there's that little space there just to say, this is the dimension, even if they have the same like line weight and stuff, this is the dimension, this is the thing. And what I just did sort of obscures that a little bit because my dimension lines themselves still go clear to the top. So I think what I do here is pick this one and tell it don't dimension from that point up there, dimension down to this point down here. And we'll do the same thing there and there. Partially fixed. And now this one is still going all the way up. So I'll pick it and drag down and snap to there. And I guess I'll do it over here as well. So now they're all nicely in a row. You can see they don't overlap. I got a consistent line all the way across. A way to do this, if you've created the first one and you just want to create several more along that wall, instead of like doing them one at a time, we can do several at once to continue this dimension on down all the way to the end of the room. And that's with a dimension continue this guy, and I just want to keep taking it to there, to there, to there, and to there. And if I click out here, it'll give me a dimension, so I just hit escape, and I'm done. And that A gets them looking good, and B is easier than doing separate ones and moving them into place. If I decide, oh, I'd like to do a little something extra, let's say I want to have, in addition to those, I like to have one long dimension that goes the whole length, dim, from here to here, and then drag it down. And yeah, it's on the wrong layer, but we'll change that with mesh properties. The way these normally work is we're going to try to avoid having anything like that happening, having one set of dimension line cross other ones. Starts making unclear about just what's happening. So I'll do Control Z. And we do want to have the smaller dimensions tight up against the geometry and the larger ones farther and farther away. And let's say I decided I had some other little details I wanted to dimension in here, and I need to move all these guys down. That's when the stretch command, just S for stretch, I'm going to window those and just pull them all down. So that's a very clean way, and then I can go in and put whatever other little dimensions I needed there for windows or something or other. If I had let's say I had a bunch of kitchen cabinets. stretch that in. It's going to be hard to put their dimensions down here. So typically the cabinet dimensions go out at the top. Place this first one. And then you'll see right up, I haven't finished the command yet. Up here in the command line, it's saying one of my options here is to continue. So we'll just continue that one. And I need to pick this line to tell the dimensions to go this way and not that way. So I'll pick this, and I can go there and there and there, and then escape. And then I'll use match properties again, MA, MA, and change those guys to the dimension layer. Anyway, so that's helps clean those drawings up a lot and starts getting a very consistent way from one to the next. Here, the problem really is that the issue is that I've just got dimension lines crossing, which can make things a little unclear. And I think if I wanted to keep all my dimensions off of my geometry, I would tend to do it like this, so that I don't end up having dimensions sitting right on top of what I've been drawing, but they're all pulled out to the side in a consistent manner. A couple of things about dimensioning doors. That door over there, how many other of you, 20? There are about 15 different sizes for that doors in your elevations. The closet door. And the deal with doors is basically all these standard doors are either 6'8" or 7 feet tall and an even number of inches wide. The frames are made, let's say, a 36-inch opening, and the door comes in at 35 7/8 or something rather, but they're all treated and drawn as 32, 34, 36. And that's how we need to dimension them, because if I say I need a 33 3/4-inch door, the door guy will think, oh, a custom door, and charge extra. Only a couple of times would like be a 33-inch door if you got double doors on some closet that can't change, and then that would be a custom door. But pretty much all of these we want to draw at the full 36. And then the door frames, which around here are 2 inches here, and it's the same. It's the same at the top. We just offset that 2 inches to be the door frame and stick it on the lighter layer. So the actual opening shows with the darker line. And the frame shows that way. And usually on your interior elevations, you won't end up dimensioning the door frames. There'll be a whole extra sheet somewhere, half a sheet or something maybe, with an elevation of the different frame types you're going to be using. And that would be 2 inches like this. Ones that go into masonry wall have a 4-inch head to fit into the concrete block module at 7'4". And wood ones will have, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 inches wide, depending on how that is. So you draw them here, but actually call them out specifically on another sheet of door and frame elevations. You'll notice that when I offset this, O for offset, I could do that as one element, because what I had drawn there, this guy right here is a polyline, which is any combination of lines and arcs that touch at their endpoints. So draw polyline. You can see it's a line and a possible arc. Start out by drawing lines. I'll turn ortho off, and I can draw that's all one object. I can then move that around as one object. I can also use arc segments interspersed with the straight line segments. A PL is the shortcut for polyline. So I have some choices here. As I'm still in the polyline command, I can close it, which will just snap back to there and stop drawing it. Or I can change over to arc segments. I can just type A or pick that little button right there, at which point it will start creating an arc that's tangent to the last segment that I've drawn. And it'll keep doing that, so tangent arcs. And if I type, and now I have some options for arcs, which I hardly ever use. Basically, I just want to switch back to line, so I can then start drawing as with lines again, and then I'll use C to close. And now I have a closed polyline, and I can offset that. Offset 3 inches. as desired. A polyline, let me just draw a straight one, can have, if we need to make some really fat lines in our drawing for whatever reason, I mean, for graphic design on the title page or whatever, we can just select it and in properties, go down and change its global width to say 2 inches. And the whole thing just becomes a fat 2-inch thing. It still is only defined by 2 points. It's not like I've got 4. It's not a rectangle. It's still a vector. It's just a fat vector. I can change the widths at the beginning and the end of each segment. So let's say I'll leave the starting segment. This was where it began, going up to here. Let's say the end will be at 6 inches. Then it starts to open up like that. So you can do some interesting things with this when you combine width with arcs. For instance, let's do polyline with 12, 0. So here, these two are both width of 2. This one's width of 2, this one width of 2, and this one goes from a width of 12 down to a width of 0 to make like an arrow there. If I do an arc with a width of 12 and width of 0, I can start creating shapes like that. Again, more graphic designy or landscape layout or something than most pure architectural forms, but there it is, and it just needs some experimentation to see how those all are going to work for you. You don't have to draw a polyline, especially a complex one, all at one go. Let's get rid of these. Let's imagine that over time I had sort of built a window. I'd measured different parts of it, and I ended up with a rectangle looking thing, but it ends up being 4 different pieces. If I want to move them all at once, I've got to grab all 4 of them, which might be awkward depending on how this is all working out. So if we go into modify, we can join these into a single polyline. We go to modify, join, and that little graphic shows like 2 things coming together. We can then pick the objects, enter, and now they're all turned into one polyline. We can move that all at once. We can still stretch it any way we want to stretch it, but it's all one object in terms of its layer and its line type and moving it around. We can also create polylines. Click an interior point and it creates a polyline that forms the boundary of that shape. So if I wanted to like maybe hatch this area or do some stained glass, I wanted this to be one color and this to be another color, I can use there are 2 ways to do this, but the boundary command, basically you can ignore everything down here and just say pick points and click in here, and it creates that polyline. I'll do another one out here. And now I can move. Oh, maybe I had to hit enter or something. Hang on. Boundary. BO. Pick points. Pick. Hit enter. Got it. Pick a point and hit enter. And then one of the selection methods we have is to move the last object that's been created. So if I go to move and then P for previous, I mean L for last, then I can grab that object and move it around. So I don't have to like take those shapes and copy them and trim them and get them to the shape I want. I can just say, this is the shape that I want to use. At this point, this is completely independent of these guys. You know, if I move the circle, this won't change. It's a separate, not connected object. So if I did that, let me just see something. If I did boundary, pick points, if I pick here and hit enter, created 2 polylines. Okay, so move last, move. move. There we go. A couple of uses for polylines. If we have a floor plan and are doing our egress calculations, which would include finding the length of the route from the farthest point to the exit, we can pick that, draw it, and then over in properties, we can see that its length is 40 feet, 8 inches, and then you compare that to the table that tells you how far it can be for that kind of a space. If we have a polyline, like this, then we can also see the area that it encloses. Area is 242.9 square feet. Useful for doing your rooms, seeing how big they are, trace it with a polyline, and then query the polyline. Just list it to see how big that is. You don't have to ask, it's just one of its properties that comes along with it. Okay, so polylines are connected and usually have some single purpose, a room enclosure or an escape route. But let's imagine we had CP, a conference table and some chairs. And we wanted to move those around the room. I can't connect them like a polyline. They don't touch. We haven't gotten to blocks yet, but it's not really a block. A block is one thing. One of these chairs could be a block, but not the whole assembly. But we can just make these a group for the time being. If we want to try what these look like in another room, for instance, let's get rid of this. And that's just up here with group. On the ribbon, it's under groups. Create a group, or you can just type the word group, or you can just type the letter G, because it's used so often. I'll do that. G. Select objects. I'm just going to pick them. And now we're treated for the time being as if they're one object. We can copy these. It's important to understand that these two groups are now completely independent of each other. This is the group in the conference room, and this is the group in the classroom. We decided to rearrange things in here. Right-click, edit group, group. Oh, I can say ungroup. In which case, these are now separate. These are still together. They don't affect each other at all. Cancel, sorry. And if I copy this over to here, and we have a couple of group editing. Where'd it go? Group. We can ungroup. I can remove from the group. Let's just say this guy right here. Then this is this new table. We didn't have as many chairs in that room. Changing a group changes only that one group. Once you create a group, it's entirely separate from any previous version of that. It's just a useful, usually temporary way to treat things together. And they can be anything. It can be a chair and tables and an ashtray and a light fixture and whatever else you have in the drawing. Just a useful group of things you want to deal with all at the same time. It's quite a different story for blocks. Unlike groups, which are informal and can come and go, and you can sort of add and subtract pieces and they don't change each other, blocks are usually just one thing, like a bathtub or a chair or an ashtray or a light fixture, something or other, related to one discipline and not something we're just going to mess with randomly. So as an in-house exercise, let's go ahead and make an actual chair as a block and place it, make copies of it, edit it, and watch them all change at the same time, so we can get some idea of how we can make the auto part of AutoCAD start to do some work for us instead of drawing things over and over and over again. I'm just going to erase all my chairs here. And I'm going to make a chair that's dead simple to start with. I'm just going to do like 3 feet by 3 feet and put a back and arms on it. Just something like that. First, I'm going to do a rectangle at 3 feet, 3 feet. And I'm just going to draw a line. Let's see, I'll turn my snaps on. Well, the snap I really want to have turned on here is nearest, which will snap to the line, but not necessarily to an endpoint. So I'll just do a line there to there, a line from there to there. This is where layer 0 really becomes important. Layer 0, when we're using creating blocks, functions as sort of a chameleon, which is my term. I've never seen it around, but it means that the object, if we end up putting this block on the furniture layer, it'll take on the coloration of the furniture layer. If we put it on the wall layer or the plumbing layer, it'll take on those colors and line types. So one thing you must do when creating a block, it's really, really very important, and it's right here on Create a Block Step 1, is to select the things that you've drawn, and over in Properties, say I want their color to be by block. So the block will be on a layer, and the lines will inherit the block's color, and the block will inherit the layer's color. It's pretty straightforward. So they're going to be on layer 0, and their color is by block. And that's the only even slightly tricky thing about making a block to work consistently and predictably in AutoCAD. So there's our geometry, a rectangle and a couple of lines. And each one is colors by block, and the layer is 0. Making blocks is such a basic operation in AutoCAD that we can type block or just the letter B, where we get this block definition dialog. And unlike a group where the name is optional, here it's required. This has to have a name. So I'm going to call this Easy Chair. I'm going to call it Easy Chair 01, just to, we might be making others. That's its name. And then we'll just go sort of right through these sections of the dialog. And when we're placing a chair or placing a block, the cursor will be somewhere, and we sort of decide whether we want the cursor to be there, and that's where the block will happen, or maybe the cursor is going to be there. This is the handle for the chair, and I'm going to put it right here to make it obvious what's going on. So the base point, I'm going to specify on screen would be like X's and zeros. I just want to pick the point, and I'm going to click to the middle of that front line. I recommend always picking the point graphically, so you don't end up with a base point that's somewhere very distant from the actual geometry. Okay, so we've got a name, we've got a base point. We don't have the objects yet. Just going to say select objects. Going to say select objects, and then just window these guys and hit enter. So at that point, we get a little preview of the block up here just to let us know what's been picked. Once we save this, we have a choice of whether we want to just keep the geometry here and define the block, but not create. We want to say convert this to the block. That's what we want to do. And we're going to leave convert to block checked and leave allow exploding checked if we want to mess with it later on. That's all we do. Block definition, we got a name, we got a point, we got objects. That's all we need. Okay. So now when we pick this, it's one thing instead of 4. And if we slide down, we can see that it's a block reference. Its name is Easy Chair 01. It hasn't been rotated from the original way we defined it. And we haven't changed its scale at all. We haven't made it taller or wider. We just left it the same size. So the two ways now to place this in our drawing. Once it's there, we can do copy, just like anything, and copy it from one place to another. Or even if we erased all these, we have created in the drawing's internal database the idea of that chair, Easy Chair 01, as a block. It's a known thing in this drawing, even if it doesn't appear on the screen. So we can bring that up a couple of different ways. We can use the insert command, or just the letter I, which brings up this palette over here, which shows us, let's stop at a couple of tabs here, which shows us blocks that are defined in the current drawing, our title block some sheet number things that we'll get to, and our easy chair that's now been created. There's a tab for recent ones that have been used, which as you start to place more of, if you've been working on two different drawings, the one from your previous drawing will start to show up here. And then we can also set up favorites of ones you like to use all the time on a bunch of drawings, or libraries where the whole stack of them started up. But we just want to pick the easy chair and just click it and drag it into the drawing. Okay, so I'm going to close that insert palette. I'm going to copy this a couple of times. You'll see that I have a furniture layer here, furniture, which will be the perfect place for this, for interior design furniture. And if we pick one of our chairs here and change its layer to furniture, then this will take on the color of furniture. So we can start to create lots of different pieces of furniture, and know because they're orange, they're all in that layer. Turn that layer off, we'll turn them all on and off at the same time. So this one is on layer 0. I can put it on the glazing layer if I want, and it'll turn blue because it's on the glazing layer. This one's on the furniture layer. But when I put the blue one on the furniture layer, there's a command called match properties, modify match properties, or MA, which lets you pick anything and use it as, that's picking that color, picking that line type, picking that layer, and applying that to anything else that you pick it. Shouldn't have been the wall. And that can be applied to multiple things. If I still want to use these as schematic pieces of furniture, I can use MA. Yeah, I can do that. Okay, let's look at the things that we can do with a block. If I want to populate this table with them, I'll just copy this around. Copy. So this guy, there are a couple of different ways to rotate it. One is to select it, enter, use the modify, rotate, however you get to rotate. Pick a corner point, rotate it around. That's sometimes kind of awkward, especially for these that are at, all at 90 degrees. So I could pick this, and something that's built into a block is the idea of its rotation. So 0 rotation for any block will be the orientation that it was when you drew it. And if I want to rotate this one so it's facing this way, I can say either rotate it 90, 180, 270, or minus 90 would take it around this way. Let's try that. Minus 90. Yeah. And you'll notice that it rotated around that base point, which sort of took it out of position. It's not like it's in the same place, just rotated. It's like rotated from here down to here. So really, it would make better sense to have our base point be right here, so that as the chair rotates, it'll just stay right in the same place and sort of spin on its axis. Let's modify that block. I'm going to get rid of these guys. Let's keep that one, because that's sort of the one that we started with. So if we pick any block and right click it, we have two different ways to edit it. One is sort of like a little standalone block editor. Let's do that first and see what it looks like. So this, where all we see is the block itself. I'm going to draw a line from here to here. Let's see how this is going to work. A line from here to here, and then I'm going to. So here's our origin of this thing, where its x and y axes cross at 0, 0. So I'm just going to move all of this from the middle of this line down to that point, just to move the chair relative to its base point. Move all these guys from there to there. Okay, so now we have the base point of the block in the middle of it. I'll get rid of this guy and go up to close the block editor, close block editor. Save the changes to E001? Yes. So now you see when we select it, its handle is now here instead of down here. So when I change the rotation of it, the chair itself stays right in the same place, which is going to be helpful when we start moving the chairs around the table and rotating them. Come on. Undo. There we go. So now I'm going to copy BP, turn off object snaps. And now I can just use the rotation of this. So this one on the end will rotate counterclockwise 90 degrees. These two will both change their rotation 180. 180. And this guy can be either 270 or minus 90. Being able to redefine or refine a block as a project goes on can be hugely useful. I'll use an architectural example. A 10-story building, 6 windows this way and 10 windows that way. And you start out just by sketching in a rectangle for it and calling that block building window. So you start with something looking like this, just in your sort of schematic design. And then he said, well, the one across the street is a little skinnier and has that arch, but we'll sort of leave our base point here. And you can redefine the block, and then all of a sudden you've got a whole, like that. You've got the whole elevation drawn, and then you come back in over the course of time and put in whatever other details you need, and just keep updating it. And you just change it once, and all 60 of them change. And whether that's windows or furniture or anything that you're working on, you make these global changes really very, very quickly. One of the very last jobs I did drafting by hand was for a architecture firm in New Haven we were renovating a bank to put in ATM machines, but they needed to see what it looked like on the whole building. So drawing by hand, we draw on a piece of tracing paper or something or other what the window looked like, and we put that underneath our the sheet we're drawing on and trace it, and then peel that up and move it over 2¼ inches and put that down and trace it again and move it over. And at the same time, I was beginning to teach CAD as a night job, and it was so infuriating to be having to draw it by hand when I knew that the capability was there, even with the rudimentary CAD of 1985 or something or other. I just knew there was a better way, and it's nice to have it here now. And theoretically, all this time we save goes into better design, more thoughtful design. If it's not, why bother? We have crappy buildings really fast. That's not really an improvement. But if it does save you, if the 3 days it saved you drawing all those windows is time you can really put into better space planning or better materials or another trip to the site, I think that's worth it. AutoCAD comes with a sort of rudimentary set of pre-made symbols, and we can go into that with on the ribbon, it's view, palettes, tool palettes. And this gives us this other palette, which has in some, the order seems to change all the time. But if we pick the architecture tab here, let's pick the toilet, the imperial toilet. It's got metric down here. We'll just pick the toilet and just drag it into your floor plan. Now, all these ones with the zigzag, the lightning bolt, and I forget just how this happens. We're not going to do it. Actually, the one block contains multiple views of that object. So we'll close this. But when we pick this elevation view, which is the first one, and scroll down, we can see down here at the bottom, we've got a couple of options of what do I want to show. If I pick type view from elongated front, I can drop down to say, well, what does that look like in plan or a side view? Or so that's the like handicapped elongated bowl. Here are the shorter ones and what they might look. Including, and my grandmother had one of these in her house. It had the like an oak tank way up on the wall, and when you'd pull the chain, and there's this, it really moved. This before they really figured out how to make bowls very effective, so they used just water pressure. So that's fun, but you get to choose those. And if you pick this one, then you can also flip it from left to right, depending on what your particular elevation view happens to need. So let's look at some more of those. On a Windows computer, Control-3 brings up that menu. I don't know if the Mac does. You can always go through View, Palettes, Tool Palettes. And let's look at this Imperial door, since we all just finished doing doors. Door plan view supporting various standard sizes and opening angles. Just drag it in. And, it'll snap, to a line. So then what are our options? We can pick that and scroll down to this fun stuff where we do the door size. Let me just make that and you notice these are coming in those even inches, numbers of feet. We're not getting 3/4 or half inches. They're all these guys. Let's make it 2/8. Wall thickness. Okay, the way this is made, it only goes up to, it only does 4, 5, and 6 inch wall thickness. So that's sort of a limitation here on this. We'd have to actually draw those lines ourselves and still cut out the walls, but there's a little bit of that. And the opening angle. So open 45, open 90. Anyway, so we won't be sort of animating ours, but we've got some basic sort of things here. And the ones I want to get, we'll be doing as the exercise at the end of the class, are not on the architectural tab, but on the annotation tab, where we'll be placing the markers in the plans to tell us which elevation that is on our sheet of elevations. So there's a lot of this going on, hatches, whatever all that is. I just use annotation, architecture, and hatches. Okay, pre-made blocks. That was page 2, page 3. Oh, here's something we have to do about this this chair. Let's say we want to turn this into like a love seat and just make it twice as long. So that means that our scale here, this is the X direction, this is the Y direction. We just make our X direction twice as big, let's just say 2, and we get a love seat with fat arms. One drawback of this is, if this was actually a furniture family, the arms would be the same width, and just you get an extra pillow in the middle or something or other. When AutoCAD stretches, it scales something. It scales it like it was on silly putty and just got stretched. There's no like built-in intelligence to keep the arms skinny. We'll get that in Revit, and we would get that with some of these guys, but we're not going there because we're not going to spend that much time on AutoCAD. So we can scale them. The Z, if we create a 3-dimensional one, we could also stretch it vertically. Scale rotation, we did that. We can scale rotation 45. And one nice thing, if you've just done some sort of arbitrary rotation of this guy and you want to get it back parallel to the walls, you can just pick it and come down to the rotation and say 90 and line it back up again with your architecture. Question from the floor asking to see scaling happen again. Selected it, and in properties just came down to scale X and Y. And I scaled the X by a factor of 2 to make it twice as long. And I can make a seat for a giant and make it twice as high that way. Okay, so we looked at a couple of ways to redefine blocks. One was to use the block editor. Another is just to edit it in place where you can see it relative to the things that it's near. So let's make this a comfier chair. And I don't have to go back to my original block somewhere. I can just pick one of the instances of that block, select it, right click. And if I pick block editor, that would get me back into this environment where we created it. Let's close that. Okay, select it, right click, and select edit block in place. A further option we have with blocks is to completely replace one block with another. But let's say I'm going to make a new chair. Just some size. I'm going to fill it with a radius of 6 inches. I'm making this to be my new chair. And I put the center point somewhere in the same one. So I'm going to do block, B for block, pick point. I'll pick somewhere here in the middle of it. Select objects. Okay, I give it the name. I'll call it Easy Chair 02. So we got a name, we got a pick point, we got objects, we got a preview. I'll say okay. So I think I didn't change the layer. We'll skip that part. So here, if I go to replace block, I'll say replace Easy Chair 1 with Easy Chair 2, and then reference purge unreferenced items. It turns out that means get rid of all memory of Easy Chair 1 in this drawing. I'll say yes. So then they all change to that other shape. That's how that's supposed to work. Let me clarify one thing that I didn't make clear before with the last assignment, and that's has to do with the layers to use for the elevation views. I mean, a lot of people did them with a wall and a door and a window, or a glazing, whatever. And the problem with that is, as I mentioned briefly, is that when let's say you're working your plan and you want to turn the glazing layer off, and you just click it off. That turns it off in the whole drawing, including in your elevations. So if you run a quick plot there, those layers just won't be there. So the idea is you really want to separate your elevation layers entirely from your plan layers. So whatever is happening on plan happens there. It doesn't affect your elevations at all. So the basic hierarchy of line weights and elevations is wide lines for the elevation perimeter, things cut in section, and wall openings like doors and windows. Medium lines for major elements like the edges and corners of walls and soffits. Thin line for surface elements like door and window frames, baseboards, and casework. And fine lines for minor details like door handles, window mullions, and light switches. Use the line weights provided in the template as a starting point and adjust to your preference. And initially I'd set that it'd be like a lot of points, and then enough people clearly didn't make it clear what's going on. So if you did it, I just turned that into a bonus on top of the regular rest of the grade for the elevations. But that's pretty much the idea. So if I'm turning plan layers on and off, the elevations will not be affected. Be consistent, and when we end up plotting it, then you'll see if you like the way it looks. I mean, it's sort of a presentational issue that your artist's eyes will decide upon. I sort of pick the line weights, sort of arbitrary thicknesses, and if you like them thicker or thinner or more contrast, certainly go ahead and do that. But yeah, see, these would all be the A detail, whatever these happen to be. I should note that here I have a couple of blocks for chairs and just a polyline for a rectangle. And I can put all these inside a group. Copy. So I mean, these guys all play together in the same sandbox, doing whatever you need to have them do. I'll just read you this. Fixed size blocks. When we go to one of the a lot of things like football fields have a known size. An apartment range has a fixed size, and those we might just draw exactly as big as they need to be, 300 feet by whatever it happens to be. But there's a reason beyond just making chairs that might want to scale a little bit. We might want to have one block that can be used for a bunch of different things. This is called a unit block. And the one that comes to mind would be a door. If we made a door, just drew it, that was a 1-inch line and a 1-inch radius arc, just that's our block with its base point here. On a given wall, we could insert that and give it a scale of 36, and it would be this big already with these two the right size already. And then we just draw the jambs and trim out the wall lines. If you want to, you can just explode a block. I can pick this chair. Let's say I want to use that as the beginning for something else. Explode that. And it takes these objects back to their 0 and their color being by layer. It takes it right back where it was when I started. It should have been by block, but it was when we made it to start with. So you want to explode it, stretch it, do something with it, remake it into another block if you want, but they're not locked into being blocks for the rest of time. I'm going to skip over this thing with blocks with editable text attributes because we're going to deal with them in our exercise in a minute or two. But I want to get the idea of you starting to build a library of blocks that are useful to you. We will do this a lot more in Revit, where what comes with Revit isn't going to be exactly the piece of furniture you wanted. So you can modify one of theirs and save it with a new name, or you can just create your own from scratch. And with AutoCAD, we can take any block that we've created and save it to disk, save it out as a separate AutoCAD file that can then be loaded into any other drawing. So you start to building your own library of the stuff that you've made. And that's with the WBLOCK command, which means write a block to disk, WB for WBLOCK. And I'm going to select a block that exists here already. And I want to pick my Easy Chair 02. That's this one right here. So it's going to take that block and make it a separate standalone AutoCAD drawing. And I'll use it there I don't have things set up well on this computer to save stuff, but build documents Easy Chair 02. Okay, I'll just say save. So now if I open a new drawing, file, new, I'll start it with our 559 template. Okay. And now if I go to insert, I can pick it from over here in recent blocks, but let's assume I hadn't used it recently and want to get it off a disk. I go to insert and then pick this tool, displays a file navigation dialog box where you can specify a drawing to insert into the current drawing. And I go to documents, Easy Chair 02 right there. It's a drawing file. There's no different format or file type for a block. They're all AutoCAD drawings. So I open, and then I can put that in there. So any drawing can be inserted into any other drawing. And I guess as an example, I'd say if you had a plan of a 747 and a separate block for the chair in business class, you could have the 747 drawing open and go get the chair and drag it into place. Or you could have the chair drawing open and insert the 747 into that. I mean, you might want to do that, the second one of inserting the 747 into the chair drawing, just to see how it fit in a 747, or something like that. One last way to create a block on disk here I'm just creating a table. It's just a bunch of lines, and I don't have to take something that's already a block and write it out to disk. I can just take some geometry and write it out to disk. So if I've been messing around with laying out some picnic tables or something or other, and I want to take this beautiful thing and save it out as a picnic table 01, I can use WBLOCK, and I'll just pick these objects. I'll make this my base point right here. Select these objects, and I'm going to call this build documents a picnic table. So if I go back to my other drawing, for instance, and want to insert something, I can go over here to the blocks palette, go find picnic table on disk or download it from the internet or wherever it comes from, picnic table, okay, and then drop that into place. So it's very fluid, and with the well-stocked toolkit of blocks, you can assemble drawings very quickly. Revit comes with a much bigger library of really good stuff, and I basically have created my own sort of parallel structure to keep the things that I've created or downloaded separate from the one that comes with the program. Now let's talk about arranging drawings on a title block. If I go into my layout to look at these guys, and I just drew these sort of haphazardly, but so did some of you. You can see that I've got a bunch of drawings here, but there's, and I know because from rotating the plans and stuff, they're going to be all over the place. But it's really going to help understand these better if they're neatly in a line, and if each room proceeds sort of like a clockwise panorama, just so we can okay, so here's this and this wall and this corner and this corner are the same corner, and then over here in this corner, this is where these two walls touch, and this is where these two walls touch. So if we're getting them lined up, we got two ways to do that. We could create a separate view out here for each of these, and then line the views up. That's really the hard way to go about it. A much better possibility is to go back into model space. Maybe we just draw a line from here to here, like this, with the ortho turned on, and then move all of them so that they're that's the bottom of each of them. And it's going to help for this to have the perpendicular object snap turned on, so that when I move these, I can snap from here and just come straight down to perpendicular. Move. And then the same way, move. And here I can go from here either up to perpendicular or to intersection, or any one of the snaps that's going to pick that line. And then I don't want to take up more space on the sheet than I have to. So I might just here move these in, leaving room for dimensions and things. Like that. And then I see all of a sudden, I know that's one room, but I've got 3 different ceiling heights. Which one is it? At that point, you might decide it's this one. So I might draw a line from here to here, and then use the stretch command, S for stretch, to grab all those and bring them down. Grab all these and bring them down. And then since I've got them lined up, I can get rid of my guidelines. A couple of things I noticed. One, on the far wall of the student lounge, a number of you had sort of drawn the open doors, as if they'd swung open and were drawing the open leaves of the door against the wall that it's swung open on, and that's really not what's going on. All we really have is the door in elevation, and we don't care what happens to it in this wall. The door isn't part of each of these walls. Now I want to talk about how we know which wall in plan each of these elevations represents. Let's go back into your model space. So at some point you've got a plan and some elevations. So let's just pretend that these are the elevations of this room over here. The control 3 brings up the tool palettes, and we're not putting in architectural elements. What we're doing is putting in annotation. And what we're doing is putting in the marker that says, looking at that wall, that's going to be, let's say, detail number 1 on the given sheet. And so this is basically a call out bubble, is what we're calling this. And we can just drag it right into the drawing. And what we want to do is aim this arrow at this wall. So with this particular semi-automated block, we can select it and then just drag it around so it's aiming up. And the implication here is that right here at this line is sort of where we're standing, looking forward from that line. So we'll see this wall, we'll see this wall, and we'll see this wall. So that's the location of this has some meaning. If I move this to here, I would expect to see just from there to there. If I moved it into there, I'd expect to just see that little short wall in the elevation. Let's move it back to here. And then the same way, now I want to say with this one, I want to tell people that this is drawing number 1 that one's looking at. And that's here with the drawing title. And we can just drag this in to here. And we can do this stuff over on the layout sheet, but it's really easier here because I realize, my dimensions really stick too far down. This is all going to take a lot of space, so I'm gonna slide these up like that, so I can move this up like that and get a little more room on my sheet. Just the sort of graphic design layout of things. It's just the two we need really here: the callout bubble on the floor plan and the imperial drawing title under the elevation. So when we go over to our layout 1, at this point, I think I want to have I could do this. Where's my plans over here? But I think what I'll do is just create another window, another viewport for the plan, put it down here, and then have the elevations up on top of it or off to the side or something rather. So let's cut that back to here. Do you remember how I make another viewport with the plan? Somebody tell me. Here's the problem with AutoCAD. There's like 5 ways to do this. Okay, for me, the simplest, just because I've been doing it for so long, is just M view, make a model view in Pure and Paper Space, specify a corner, specify a corner. Okay, I could do that. And it's too small because it fits everything in there. But I'm just going to pick this and change its standard scale to the 1/4 inch equals a foot that I know and love. 1/4 inch equals a foot. Okay, so I have the beginnings of this set up. So I really would like to do at this point. I'm not sure how many more of these I'm going to be able to get on one sheet. And I have to decide, do I want to have the plan? I won't be able to fit all the rest on them here, let's say, without really squishing them. Do I want to have the plan on a sheet all by itself and the elevations all on a sheet? Try to do mix and match. And I think what I'm going to do is just have the plan by itself and these on another sheet, which would be sort of standard operating procedure for a large project. So I'm going to delete this guy actually. So layout 1 will be my plan, will contain my plan. And then since we're going to be talking about sheet names, let's say we'll make this sheet be A100, just the floor plan. And at this point, there's no sort of automatic way. We just put a piece of text in here in the sheet box. And that can be TE for text. Let's just put it in and we'll scale it later. We might be doing these things in slightly different orders from each other, but I want to get a sheet number here. I'm using TE for text. And I'm just going to accept the current text style and height and everything. Basically, just want to get a piece of text in here that looks like it's sort of fills up the box a little bit, just so we know that it's there. Okay, let's set some other stuff up. For those of you who have sort of have your elevations like this, just depending on how they were made, I think you got two things to consider. One, does it make sense to move them all just so they're all neatly lined up with each other? Like this, so when you end up placing them on a sheet, we can just do one big window and everything's all lined up already. Or would you like to have 4 separate windows that you then line up once they're on the sheet? And I would suggest this one. I would suggest moving them around so we get some good sense of alignment here. Maybe I'll create another alignment line. I mean, obviously these would be different elevations for you guys, but these don't have to be, accurate to a millimeter, but just so they start looking looking like it. You can tell stuff about your drawing when you see it all together neatly. When things are all out of place, it's not as easy to tell what how they differ and what might need to get fixed. Before we take the time to do that, let's go into and see how the rest of these are going to get set up. If we decide that my layout 2 then, M view is going to be like this, and its standard scale is going to be also 1/4 inch equals a foot. I think that's a pretty easy way to start dealing with your sheets, where there's a clear correspondence between what you have laid out in model space and what you have laid out, what's appearing on your sheets. You're not like sort of having to reinterpret it and move it around, but just what you see over here is going to be very close to what you get on your layout sheets. Okay, so the only mystery here, the only thing that's left to be done, since we're saying drawing 1 on A1 is looking that way, and we have that set up here, then we can just copy this around, put it here, select it, rotate it, and then we can change this to say to A101 or whatever one we want. Double click, and we get this little attribute editor. Attributes are text fields within a block that you can put whatever you want in there. And we'll just say that this one is going to be view 2 on A101. I'm going to turn off my turn off my furniture layer. Get rid of these. Erase. Copy this down. Double click 3. Aim this down. Copy this up. Double click 4. And then just to be neat about it, I think I'd move maybe that. I can move these like this, something like that, just to be able to see, instead of having them be randomly distributed all over the place. And then it's an easy matter just to take this one, copy, turn ortho on so it and you can choose how fully you want to change the view title. You can just say interior elevation, and people will be able to tell exactly which room and which wall you're talking about if you say that. Or you could say, double click on that. We could say classroom south wall. And then this little arrow will slide the scale on that out. And we know the scale is not 1:1. 1 inch equals 1 foot 0 inch. So you just repeat that as much as you need, and then that sets this up to tell you where things are, where to look for more details, and then this is the details themselves, with the next ones numbered 2 through 16. I guess we're about done, huh?